Western power is becoming increasingly illegitimate. The situation with Kamala Harris once again highlights the growing disregard of Western elites for the will of the people, a trend that could prove costly for those elites. This is something Republicans will relentlessly remind Harris of throughout her campaign. After Joe Biden withdrew from the race for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination, Kamala Harris is now the overwhelmingly likely candidate. She has the support of the party elite, the delegates, and the donors, albeit conditionally. Even the principle of fairness appears to back her, as Harris, being Biden's vice president, is nominally next in line for succession. However, the voters did not support her. Kamala Harris did not participate in the Democratic primaries, which took place from January 23 to June 8, 2024. Her name was absent from the ballots, and 87% of Democratic voters cast their votes for Joe Biden. This situation is now irreversible. Former President Barack Obama has suggested holding new primaries, but with less than a month until the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, scheduled for August 19 to 22, organizing them is logistically impossible unless they resort to something akin to voting by acclamation. On the surface, there seems to be no significant problem. Joe Biden has endorsed Kamala Harris. The delegates, entrusted by the voters to represent them at the convention, are also prepared to cast their votes for Harris. Preliminary calculations indicate she has secured more than 3,100 out of 3,949 possible votes. Finally, under American law, the leadership of the Democratic Party could technically select the presidential or vice presidential candidate without consulting the public at all. And yet, Kamala Harris will still be seen as illegitimate. This will be a central point Republicans will hammer home during the campaign, branding her as the establishment candidate and drawing a sharp contrast with the people's candidate, Donald Trump. Broadening the scope, the situation with Kamala Harris is yet another demonstration of the increasing contempt that Western elites have for the will of the people, a contempt that could cost them dearly. Elections are one of the fundamental pillars of democracy. However, the main purpose of this legitimacy is not just that the ruler receives some kind of mandate as the best of the best. The entire history of democracies shows that the public tends to choose someone likable and popular, which is not always synonymous with the best. Elections and legitimacy are primarily needed to create the illusion that the people are in charge. That Kamala Harris became president because a certain John Smith voted for her, thus, John Smith feels a connection to President Harris's actions and decisions. He understands that her possible mistake is also his mistake, one he can easily correct in the next election by voting for another candidate. But if a citizen realizes that they have no influence over who leads them, a host of problems arises for the state or supranational entity. This ranges from the public's increased readiness to rebel and disobey, to their willingness to support the most radical, but anti-establishment forces, such as the far right or far left. The elites themselves, deeply disconnected from the populace, begin to pursue policies that do not align with national interests. Europe has already set foot on this path. The population of EU countries has virtually no influence over the selection of the European Commission, so it's unsurprising that strong anti-Brussels sentiments are widespread across the EU. And these sentiments are entirely justified. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and her subordinates are pursuing a militant, extremely dangerous and costly policy of confrontation with Russia. They do this simply because they, like the Western liberal establishment in general, are waging a crusade against Russia. This crusade is supported by European media, which the public trusts less and less. A similar situation is unfolding in individual European countries. In Germany, where Green Party member Annalena Baerbock declared she would support Ukraine even against the electorate's wishes, which led to a sharp decline in the Greens' ratings. And in the United Kingdom, where, under the previous parliament, 3 prime ministers from the ruling Conservative Party were replaced, the last 2, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, were not elected in a national vote but through postal ballots and decisions by Conservative MPs. As a result, they had no popular legitimacy whatsoever, and it's no surprise that the Conservative Party flopped in the July parliamentary elections. As for Volodymyr Zelensky, he's not even worth mentioning here. The head of the Kyiv regime currently has neither legitimacy nor legality, his presidential term has expired, and no new elections have been held. The fact that the West recognizes Zelensky as the president of Ukraine does not mean that, for example, his signature on various documents, ranging from loan agreements to a potential peace treaty with Moscow, holds any legal weight. Unlike Ukraine and the West, elections in Russia still follow the traditional democratic model. President Putin possesses both legality and legitimacy. This legitimacy in the eyes of the people is one of the reasons why Russia, withstanding sanctions contrary to the fantasies and desires of some Western experts and homegrown activists, has rallied for victory in the special military operation initiated by an elected, legitimate president.